back to Culture Your Creative. I'm your host, Luke Gledhill. A lot of emotions and thoughts going through my mind at the moment, but I'm excited to be back. Culture Your Creative is a platform where I have a conversation one-on-one with incredible guests in the hope that you can pick up some information and learn from insights of what they do. I run a brand development agency called Just Up the Road, where I help brands and companies really portray their message and story and narrative through marketing initiatives. I also host the think tank called 21st Club, which brings together people, brands, companies, nonprofits that do good and give back through social, spiritual, and environmental initiatives. So today I'm really excited. I actually very grateful to call a good friend, Jessie May. I'd love to bring Jessie May in. Hi, Jessie May.
I'm so grateful to be here with you. Thank you for having me. Really, it's a pleasure.
Very blessed for your time, Jessie May. I appreciate it. We had a fantastic conversation. It was maybe a week or 2 weeks ago, and so I very much understand how busy you are with everything, and so I'm very grateful and aware and mindful of your time. Can we start? Can you just give us your full name and tell us currently what it is that you do? Just an oversight view, because we'll get in deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Jessie May Wolf, and as you were May is sort of my middle name, but Jessie May is definitely what I go by. And I am the founder of HeartRise, the method and the movement. And I am currently based in Canada, but LA is home. I'm from Montreal originally, but I'm currently bringing HeartRise to a global community from my base here up at the lake house. So I can share more about what HeartRise is. Do you want me to dive in, or shall I, or?
Yeah, no, please tell me some more about HeartRise movement.
Yeah. So basically, HeartRise is both a method and a movement. So as a method, it's an emotional intelligence active meditation method that helps you to plug into the intelligence of the heart. And at this time right now, it's never been more important. So I feel very passionate about sharing this medicine, this method. It's really practical. It's an accessible method that we bring into corporate culture, into educational spaces, community spaces, working with teams. We've just launched a leadership program, so we're starting to train people in the method. And then the movement side is that we're really bringing this forth in a bigger way, wherein we can, when you open up to the heart's infinite intelligence, it's amazing how much deepening whatever the said learning or experiences, it just opens up a vibrational wisdom. So wherein you can, as I like to say, experience is the heart of understanding. So when you experience something and you're present in your heart and you're tapped in, and not just the physiological heart, and we'll get into that, but really the vibration of your being, there is an intelligence that we haven't been taught how to harness, let alone access. So when we learn how to listen with that, everything that we experience, everything that we learn, the kinds of connections that we build, the kind of culture that we can commune with, and really creative possibilities are endless. So it's amazing when you tap into that heart wisdom, that powerful presence, what's possible.
Yeah, I mean, everything about what you just said resonates with me so much. But what I can't help but think, and I was thinking about this earlier, I would like to play devil's advocate a little bit with this, Jessie May, because you have so much incredible power and knowledge within what you do, and the gift that you have that you can give and that you do share with other people. When I say playing the devil's advocate, there's still a heavy stigma attached to everything that we're discussing. There's still a heavy stigma attached to what you just said. You know, somebody that's working a 9-to-5 office job somewhere, he's or she is more concerned about putting food on the table, or, you know, what they're going to be watching at night on the TV, or, you know, those things where they're kind of within the structure of society that's been built around them. They're not necessarily going to be connecting with you immediately on what you're saying, right? So why do you think that this isn't shared more easily?
Yeah, well, I think that for so long, I mean, not to get too heavy into sort of like the history and the politics of it all, but I think we've been really shut down from listening to our emotional wisdom, our heart wisdom, because it serves sort of like keeping everybody functioning and adhering to said rules and ways about being. And now that so much is shifting on the planet, especially, really tapping into the heart as sort of the epicenter, and really understanding that it's not just the physiological heart, because for so long too, the heart has been dismissed as unreliable. I don't want to open my heart because it's too emotional, or the monsoon that will come out. So we've been really programmed into this faulty thinking around the heart, which has kept us sort of like dismissed from its, sort of, or disconnected from its power. So, just by, we know notions like love and connection and certain things that we experience that really move us and bring us home to that sort of heartful presence. So we've all had glimpses of it at different stages. And to your point, I mean, when there are certain, imminent needs, that it just sort of feels like a luxury, is kind of what I'm gathering from what you're saying. And like, how do we bring it into the context of it being actually a necessity? And that's really where, when you start to really experience it, you start to witness what's possible, which is also why we do actually work with a lot of, communities that wouldn't otherwise have access, or underserved communities. And we're actually in the midst of rolling out a much bigger Shine It Forward program, which really brings it to, inner city youth. And I worked with war vets and different kinds of communities that you wouldn't necessarily expect would be drawn to something called HeartRise, let alone tapping into the heart. So it really, it's sort of this untapped resource that we haven't really been taught how to harness, let alone value, to your, even just to highlight your question, right? It's sort of like, well, why bother with the heart? And that's just the mindset that is so indoctrinated, and we've picked it up for so long.
Yeah. It is so important, the message that you just explained. It really is important. I was thinking, after our conversation and you agreed to be on this conversation episode with me, the first time we met was, I think, maybe 2 or 3 years ago at one of your HeartRise movement events. And I was very fortunate to be there and a part of that. And I think that really resonated strongly with me and helped me to move further along my journey with just figuring things out for myself, and whether that be meditation or being more mindful, or just everything that envelopes that as well. Can you give us, Jessie May, a bit of a backstory of what really actually led you up to HeartRise movement?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say that I've always been, sort of a sensitive soul, or sensitive heart. But, at certain stages along the way, I've been taught not to really lean in or trust that. But there was always this guiding force, or this guiding sort of knowing inside that I believe we all have, which this heart compass. So I would say that I've always been on a heart path, curious by nature. The heart is also curious by nature. It's more the head that gets caught up. And when I say the head, the ego mind, the limiting thoughts, so much of the programmed thinking that keeps us stuck in our ways, right? Whereas the heart is like open and curious and passionate, and like, let me learn more, and is willing to be vulnerable and tender and courageous, and all the beautiful things that we want more of in our lives. So I would say that I had the impulse and sort of the natural calling to listen to my heart from when I was young. And at each juncture in my life, I would either choose the heart path or not. And when I didn't, it would be, a bit more of a struggle, and I would kind of come back to it. And a perfect case in point is, I've always been an entrepreneur at heart, and I used to have a clothing line for many years. And, in 2008, I shifted gears. And, what I loved so much about having the collection and the clothing line was it was this sort of creative vision that I was able to express. And, I enjoyed the creative part of it and the connecting with others, but I didn't love the rat race of the industry and pumping out one collection after another. And it just felt like that was all the heady stuff. And I remember having this real sort of like come to moment where it was like, how do I, because it was actually my name. It was Jessie May was the name of the collection too. So that was sort of there was a whole identity crisis with having to part ways or put it, as I would say, Jessie May is having a nap. It was sort of like I was doing a bit of a reboot, if you will. And, it really allowed me to recognize, and it's so beautiful because those who've known me from those days and even earlier, there is sort of a heartbeat and a rhythm to everything that has evolved now into HeartRise. There's sort of this narrative, or this almost like a poem, or there's sort of a vibrancy or a vibrational frequency to it that you can feel. And when we're aligned with that, it's amazing how much life can reveal. And it does take a capacity to be courageous and to fall down, to fail, all of these things that we're taught not to do because we've got to have it all together and it's got to look good and all of that, which keeps us stuck. And I would say, so it was enough kind of, being passionate and curious and entrepreneurial enough to take those leaps. And then also at the same time being willing to fall and fail and, have challenges come up that kind of kept me curious. And then when I shifted gears, when I switched, and I've had many careers and journeys along the way, and everything from being in design and graphics and being in publishing and working in London and traveled a lot, and a lot of different things that have all contributed to what is now HeartRise. But each of those were kind of, as I was saying, building blocks. And when I reached this point of knowing that in my heart of hearts, I'd always wanted to work with others and help others and inspire others. And it was even so much of what I did when I had the clothing line, because it was, Jessie May, come out and play, and it was the butterfly was the logo, and I had all these playful words and a lot of the same, even messaging that you now see in a more perhaps evolved way with HeartRise, but, play, dream, dare, boogie, cry, come undone, all these sort of like the pulses of what have now been expanded through the work of HeartRise. But there was this sort of shift into coaching, which initially when life coaching became a thing, I was curious about it, although I was in the midst of my clothing line and collection, and it wasn't an obvious time to shift gears. But I remember thinking, wow, if this could be a career, because at a younger point, I even wanted to be a psychiatrist. I wanted to help others. I loved working with others. I'm the eldest of four. It was just in my nature to be that sort of mentor. But so I shifted into life coaching. But what I found, and the reason I bring this up is it really led to where HeartRise came in, is that working as a coach, I found it very compelling. And I was working with a lot of thought leaders, and I did different trainings, and I studied, I did the more traditional coaching route. But what I found and what I came to discover, it brought me back to the heart, wherein I noticed that no matter how grand the idea or the business plan or the vision, or working with these really powerful creatives and entrepreneurs and great, teams and leaders and all of that. But I noticed that where there was an emotional block, if there was a heart block, that there was something that wasn't moving, right? So, and we became very curious about that. And I continued my deepening in the study of the human heart, the science side, and some of the more esoteric and energetic studies. Like I studied Reiki and shamanism. And then I also went and studied heart math, which is more of the science-based aspect. And I had already studied a bit of communication within my college years, university years. So I had that sort of more sociology, psychology, more of the mind-based approach, a little more of the Western approach. So I'd seen all the, Eastern, Western approach, a bit of the science, but I was so compelled by the human heart, and I really became curious. And so the work through my coaching is how HeartRise sort of evolved, in that I would work with others. And I noticed once they started to really plug in and sort of soften in and move through, and I can get into what the method really evolved as, but it was like feeling through instead of blocking, because it was when people were stuck or blocked emotionally that they didn't have that creative flow, which is so much of what HeartRise helps to release and tap into.
Yeah. I love that, Jessie May, and such an incredible journey that has taken you to where you are right now. As you were speaking and you mentioned emotions several times, I couldn't help but think that, when my wife and I moved to the US, I used to think that it was a British thing to keep your emotions inside. We have a saying in the UK where it's stiff upper lip or pull your socks up. It's hiding and keeping the emotions in. And then I started to realize, because of how diverse and amazing my friends and network group is, that people from, whether it's Asia or wherever they're from, that there's different versions of that. Everybody's kind of told the same thing, to not show emotions, to not necessarily open and show love too much. It's it's kind of a strange thing. And it's been empowering to be on the journey here. I would say in Los Angeles, but I guess it's just in general that when you start to change your mindset a bit more and you start to open up a bit more, then those other things or other people start to come into your life more that way. And so, like, to go back to that, why do you think it's ingrained in a younger age about not showing emotions so much?
Well, I love that you asked that, and that's like it hits right into the heart spot of where this all like really comes alive. And it's, that ultimately, children by nature are plugged into their heart. They feel it all. And we can even go through, and I'll share a bit more about the method, but it's more that it's the programming. And I love those. I'm going to have to take some of those, the stiff upper lip, and, because I'll often describe some of the terms and some of the programming that we just pass on from generation to generation, where, children should be seen and not heard, or toughen up, especially for young boys. You see where, you've got to be a man and, be tough like a man, so this whole sort of bully culture that we don't realize, it's subtle, but it's profound. And it really affects like one experience of like, or even for like, don't be a girl, like these ideas of like, there's so much of this like subtle, but really deeply disturbing programming that has really shunned us from our feeling expression. And actually, by feeling through is how we build the kind of resilience that it takes, which is why we're so many of us are emotionally immature, because we haven't been taught how to feel through safely, which is what the method allows for. So wherein we're so afraid to open our heart for that very reason, because there's so much that hasn't been process. There's my Canadian. Whenever I say that, people are like process, but it's process, the American thing. But the sort of alchemy of what happens when you let yourself feel. I mean, emotion is energy in motion. You have to feel the feelings so that they don't hold sway over us. And that's what, began my, sort of curiosity. And I was always a very passionate, emotive kind of being. That was part of who I was, and I would let myself feel it all. And it wasn't always necessarily pretty, but I knew there was something more to that. And, when I began to examine and understand just how important, emotional intelligence is. And I mean, even not to go into current circumstances, but in general, when I work with leadership or teams or any environments for that matter, the more emotionally intelligent we are, the more able we are to even listen to what the intellect wants to have us process or take in. So it's super important. And it's something that we have undermined, largely unconsciously, but it's something that we've kind of, dismissed or kind of just tucked under as unimportant. And so it's very much programmed into the culture and sort of the mindset, particularly the Western world. But, you see it across the board. And so liberating that becomes something really powerful.
Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. And as you was talking then, Jessie May, I was thinking, so I run a lot. I've been a runner for quite a while now. And when I was back in the UK, there was a period of time where I would have a recurring injury, but it wasn't in one spot. It would travel up and down one leg, particularly my right leg. And my wife was seeing a homeopath at the time. And so I went to meet with him and talk through a lot of stuff before we would get to a remedy that he was going to provide. And one of the first things that he told me was that the issue wasn't the injury, the issue was the emotions that were being stored within those parts of the body.
Yeah.
And that's something that it's stuck in my mind, and I think it's important, definitely, to hear that the work that you do allows people to really unblock a lot of issues that is stored up in their body and mind.
Very much so. And, and the heart and the body wisdom are so interconnected. So the heart is sort of like the epicenter, but it's directly connected with the body. And so that's exactly right. When we unlock a lot of the emotional matter that we're holding, it can often relieve, said physical pain. People will be doing physio or trying to do other kinds of like physical healing when they haven't really gotten to, as you just described, the source, because usually it's something else that's there that's just sort of camouflaged or blocked or being held in the body because we haven't metabolized it. We haven't felt our way through.
So there was something I read on your website. There's a few quotes that I want to bring up. But the
Yeah.
first one that I read, and I'd love your answer and take on this.
Yeah.
Our radiance is contagious.
Yeah.
Your heart ignites all those it touches.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely a big part of what HeartRise is all about. And what's really meant by that is, one courageous heart, one being, one person who is really listening and honoring their heart, because it is this sort of a vibrational resonance. So if you think about it, we use things to describe, and energy could sound woo woo. I realize that, but when we really consider energetics in terms of how we feel around people, right? So when you start to really kind of break it down into, like, somebody will use terms to describe energy, but we don't outright describe it. So we'll say, for example, someone walks into a room, they light up the room. What is it about them that's lighting up the room? Conversely, you'll have other people that will enter a space, and all of a sudden it's like the heaviness sets in. It's like, dun, 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 like he or she has arrived, and you feel that the whole sort of temperature, the mood, the energy, the atmosphere shifts. So that is being triggered or caused by the heart power or presence. So when we're blocked up, shut down, contracted, fear-based, heavy energy, we bring that into the space. So our energy actually leads before we even open our mouth. So the idea that one heart ignited ignites or touches all those it reaches is like a real impassioned heart, someone who's really plugged in, lit up, connected to their truth. Those are the types of people that we want to be around, that feel good to be around, that make us feel good, that invite us to witness the light of our being. There are so many beautiful expressions in even different cultural traditions, from even the term namaste, the spirit in me sees the spirit in you, or aho in shamanism, which is, the I see you, and it's when we're in our heart, like the real seeing of someone's beingness. And when we're in that and we connect with that, it's amazing what can open up and the kind of connectivity that can happen. So our radiance is contagious, is that one heart fully ignited and illumined can really inspire all those that it reaches. And I've had the real privilege of witnessing what that can look like or feel like in a group of any type of group, and it can be complete strangers. And I described a bit of the different environments we bring this to, but it's far reaching.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many thoughts I have right now as you were talking. You and I spoke a little bit before we started this about Dr. Joe Dispenza. I've been reading his book and understanding things a lot more. And I know you do very similar work. One thing that I started to learn from what he spoke about with focusing and cultivating energy and love within your heart, because once you can do that within your own heart, and then raise the vibration and the energy to outside, and then spread that to other people, that's where things really start to change. And he talks a lot about, obviously, quantum physics and vibrations and multi-universes, and you and I just spoke before about, and in fact you even mentioned vibrations and frequencies. Love is one of the highest frequencies, right? So I only started to really understand this recent. So if you don't know, you don't know, but you can learn. If a frequency is that high, you have unlimited possibilities with that frequency, right? So do you want to tell me a bit more about perhaps some of your method and how
it applies? Thank you for sharing that. And I will say too, you talked about love, and I say, like, love is our native frequency. I would even go so far as to say that, and that's something I share a lot with HeartRise, that love is what we're born with, fear is what we learn here. It's Course in Miracles, Marianne Williamson. It's this notion that it's the essence of our beingness, and when we return home to that and we awaken that, and when we're in that, which comes back to our radiance is contagious, and I'll get back to the method and the frequency piece, but once ignited, you ignite that in others. So you call forth that frequency. So if your frequency is elevated, so if your vibes are high, if you're bringing it and you are feeling good and you are connected to your heart, people feel that, and that activates that in other. So even if somebody, and that my greatest joy is when I see, we talk about it in terms of head trip and heart power, which in other sort of spiritual realms would be, ego and soul, but that we just, so HeartRise is, it's not like we've reinvented the wheel. It's just a different way of sharing said truth in a novel way that really works with the energy of the heart. So that said, this vibrational wisdom or this frequency that we all have available, it's sort of like, if you think of it as you're plugging into different channels, and when the heart is very blocked and contracted, or I call that emotional constipation, when you're really jammed up, you're not available to a high frequency at all, right? You're shut off, you're disconnected, you're busy minded, you're tripping, you're stressed, right? You're overthinking, you're wasting energy, because thoughts are energy, feelings are energy, and we are energetic beings. So we want to have the energy moving, right? Emotion, energy, emotion. And if we're holding on and we're tense and we're we're reactive. That's what comes from that. So the method itself helps to actually move through said experience, said block, said trigger, so you can start to witness. So as with any style of meditation, because it is a form of active meditation, it's a lot more than that, because it's a whole way of living and breathing and being. But when you begin to observe, and it's interesting, because one of my initial blocks with meditation was I had a hard time keeping this quiet, like the nonstop. I was like, no, it's not going to shut down. That was me for many years back in the fashion days and all of those busier years. And what I noticed was when I would witness said thought, instead of just trying to quiet it, because I really struggled with cultivating the stillness within, and why that was, and what I came to understand was there was a lot of this emotional matter that wasn't being experienced or felt through, right? So we have to feel through to heal through. You have to move the energy in order to release it, right? So it's just many ways of saying the same thing. But in essence, the method helps you to move through these 4 steps. So the first step is to witness. So with Heart Vision, I see. So we're bringing awareness and attention to the heart center, which is the epicenter, the engine of your being, your real, and it is quite literally the electromagnetic field. It's the power source of your being. So you bring your attention there. So you witness, okay, that situation, like let's take a trigger situation. So like, let's just use a real-time example. So let's say I'm working with a team at work, and a certain email comes in that just sets someone off, or it just takes them off their base, and they're working on a deadline. It's like, oh, that email from Bob just threw me for a loop, right? So you witness that, you would see it, you bring the attention to your heart center. With Heart Vision, I see the second step is, and this is where you really begin to breathe and move into connecting to that higher frequency, if you will, you feel. So instead of suppressing the feeling, which is what who head trip busy mind likes to do, right? It's like, I'm going to just put that over there for later, right? And we stockpile the emotions, and then we're these eruptive kind of beings. So you feel instead, oh, that was uncomfortable, that that made me feel anxious, or that made me feel stressed. Not to overthink it. And with practice with breath, you can really actually feel what you need to feel, so that you can start to move the energy to elevate the frequency, if you will, to upgrade. So you feel what you need to feel is the second step. And then with heart knowing, which helps to build that strength, that resiliency, I free. And there's a real release. And again, working with breath. And when you do that, it starts to really release and open up the space and the field. So you just feel more expansive. And then in the last step, which is with heart wisdom, I flow, really activate. And that's where, with practice, the more times you tap in and tune in, you can notice, okay, that situation blocked me, contracted me. I'm going to feel it instead, free it, and flow. So the more times you practice, so it's cyclical, it's rhythmic, and it helps you really plug in and essentially activate and elevate your frequency. Because sometimes, to just sort of call in love, or to call in this high vibe. And what I've noticed is a lot of times, even things like affirmations, and there are a lot of practices out there, and I, if they work for you, I honor that. But what I found is, for me to just tap into a high frequency, again, in the same way I couldn't quiet my mind, I was like, I need to do the work to get there, right? So that's where your heart is your best companion, because it really helps you to alchemize the noise, to move through the energy that you would otherwise be blocking, which essentially, if you think of it as static on the frequency, it blocks you from getting to that higher frequency. So that's, and then flow is love. It's the highest vibration. The more flow you're in, the easier life is, the more able you are to respond. So when that, let's say, email from Bob came in, instead of like, like going into either telling everyone about it and like escalating the stress or reacting with a harsh response, you take a moment, you reset, you recalibrate, you come back, and you can actually respond from a more heart wise, with heart wisdom I flow space.
Yeah, do you know what I really love about that, Jessie May, is that I'm sure that there is a lot of work that gets you to that point, but those four things that you said, they allow you to essentially break a pattern or break a habit or stop something further from happening, which you don't necessarily want to happen, right? The email was a perfect example. It could be a text message. It could be a call. It could be someone cutting you up on the road or freeway. It could be anything like that. And that gives you the power and the strength to know, and everything you said, take the pause, feel the work that you've done inside, and before you move on. I just think that, I mean, wow, if everybody was able to do that.
It's pretty powerful. And I have to say, it's been really beautiful to witness some of the least obvious people that, I'm always compelled when I see someone who's, because typically it's the more heady, the more intellectual, or the more logic-minded sort of individuals that will be challenged by something that's about the heart, let alone centered in the heart, let alone dealing with feelings. It's like, I don't got time for this, right? Like that's sort of the no thanks, too busy, right? But the experience of witnessing someone just have, from even one session, I mean, you've seen it just from attending. And, I'm always amazed at, people who will tell me they've done years of therapy and in just one session, they've unlocked so much. And, a lot of it comes from the kind of container that's held when someone's really in their heart. And we've been actually summoning that and speaking to that a lot. And it was one of the reasons initially that I was challenged about whether or not to impart this sort of leadership, because it is a method that's teachable. And, I had two camps in my community, and some were like, no, you are HeartRise and you are, and I thought, no. And I know from some of my favorite practices, which are passed along, it's definitely a fusion of so many of the different modalities I've studied and trained in, and a lot of deep field work, and something that came through me through the work. So it really is like a real, it's powerful because I know it through lived experience. And I also know that it's something that is a language of heart that I don't want to say anyone can teach, but anyone who's deeply in their genuine heart can take on and bring about. Firstly, they can experience it for themselves. And so this leadership piece has been really beautiful, because part of it is feeling safe enough, because that's a big part of what people will share in a session, is that they feel safe, they feel seen. Because one of the reasons we're so afraid to feel is because we don't feel safe to, so that's definitely an important piece to address, because of the sort of should show and so much of that should narrative that we're from such a young age prescribed, and this is how it has to be. And so we don't want to like let anything come undone or be seen. So a big part of it is really feeling safe enough to feel, so that we can, but in one session, it's amazing how powerful a shift one can experience. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just you saying that, I can't wait till we can meet again. And I'd love to join a session again, because it was really empowering. You and I, when we had a conversation the other week on the phone, you were telling me about the next stage and process of where you are. And I found that incredible that you're actually now taking it to companies and corporations to really help with employees. And I thought about that for a little while afterwards, and thought that how productive people could be, how productive and good companies could be with having the benefit of what you teach. Do you want to explain a bit more about that?
Absolutely. And thank you for saying that. It's been really organic and beautiful to witness how profound the impact is in said corporate culture. And again, it happened super organically, wherein I had people coming to the Den meditation where I teach regularly, and, Soho House, a lot of the locations where I was teaching, where they said, I'd love to have you come to our company. Like, my team could really use this sort of thing. So that was really the most organic way that it evolved. And then in so doing, what I found was super compelling was seeing and witnessing how the leaders were able to not just empower their team, but also then start to call forth the best in their teams. So to start to witness people leading with this sort of emotional intelligence and seeing how creativity, problem solving, things like I mentioned briefly there, the deadline thing. So working with even, sales teams and different kinds, marketing, creative teams, and problem solving, conflict resolution. Like, how many meetings does it take to get to one decision, right? If you have heart wisdom and flow, and you're connected and you're open and you're actually listening to each other, what a concept. It's a game changer. So it really shifts the sort of the frequency, the energy in which people are engaging. And it's actually been super intriguing now to shift into bringing it into Zoom spaces where, because of so much of what we're doing now that is digital, we were already doing a lot of the kind of part two. I was doing a lot of the in-person on site, and then we would have the continuity piece through Zoom. And now Zoom has become sort of the main event, or online virtual conferencing has become the main space. And that said, it's been super interesting to witness how even, and you wouldn't think, or maybe you would, but I was curious to see how it was going to roll out, but that just by the energetics, you can still really feel when someone is present and really holding that space and really listening and hearing you, despite the geographic physical distance. So it's been really remarkable to witness that. But it helps with everything from creativity to productivity to time management, getting in sync with how different people also have their own way of working. So often corporate culture tends to homogenize, and this is how we do things. And it helps to cultivate, letting people find their own authentic way, but still getting to that said destination and communication. So better empowering of voice so they can speak their truth, and also that active listening. And then community, a sense of community and belonging. When you have a culture that feels like they belong, and not in a homogenizing kind of belonging, but in they're all part of, something bigger that really is meaningful, then it really starts to create this, I'm a part of something and it's meaningful. And then that sort of passion and purpose becomes elevated, and it really provides that sort of, we see a lot where, just retention is a big issue for a lot of companies, especially with the younger, Gen Z culture. It's sort of like they're in and out, and it's like, what have you got for me? If it's not interesting enough, they're out the door. So how do you build culture? So it really helps to empower a culture of belonging and creative aliveness and passion and momentum and all of the things that really help productivity, and all the, the bottom line stuff is a positive outcome from focusing on your people and empowering your people.
Yeah. I really love that. And something you said that resonated, you said about just people listening, and especially how many meetings does it take to get to an answer. I was very fortunate to have had one of these conversations with a good friend, Daniel, who runs a company and brand called Rasterclat. And he embodies a lot about what you talk about within his company culture. And it's incredible to see what he does. And he says, he told me that he writes down intentions for his day. And so since he told me that, I'd started to do the same. And one that I do generally write every day is my intention for today is to just listen. And so many people want to just be heard, and so they will just talk, and I always try to be mindful to just listen, and I think that's can definitely resolve a lot of things.
That's beautiful, and I really heard that, and that really landed, and thank you for saying that, because it is so beautiful. It's one of the greatest gifts we can give. And to your point, so often, and again, it's the ego, it's that same little kid that didn't get what it needed because it didn't, we didn't feel what we really meant to feel. So we're like, look at me, listen to me, right? It's like, what a concept if we could actually just learn how to move through the feels so that we could be present enough to be with another, because we're not so pent up with all of the unresolved emotional matter. And it's that spaciousness that happens when we're really being heard and we are really listening, and the level of connection and depth of communication and resolution, back to that piece about how many meetings does it take to sort of get to one decision, when you have people that aren't talking over each other, let alone just, there's two ways that it tends to manifest when it's busy minded and heart block. It's either they're talking over each other, which is the worst kind, but I see that a lot at corporate. And or what's almost or equally bad is where you'll see the waiting for their turn to speak but not listening, right? That's often, they're busy on their thing, or they're focusing on stuff up here, focused on what they want to say, but not actually listening. And that heartful listening, again, it's that felt energy. The same way when you walk into a space, you light up a room, or you bring the heavy, we feel it when someone's really listening. And it's a beautiful gift. And to have that in corporate environments, or any community for that matter, it's really a gift. Because so often people, I'm amazed at how few people have actually been really seen or heard in their life. I mean, that's the truth.
So I think we actually need to get you to major politicians so that you can teach your HeartRise movement around the world to major politicians.
I love that you're saying that. It's interesting because what came up recently, and I know we don't want to get too into current situation, but I had someone I was chatting with the other day say the police academy, with all, if you think about it, because so many of, from politics to even the police sort of system and academy, there a lot of this sort of programmed out of feeling, right? As if feeling is weak. That's the programming. That's the mindset, right? Actually, to be emotionally wise and fierce and strong and intelligent is that's how you lead. And imagine if, the police and anyone in those positions of power didn't rule with the kind of fear, kind of control power, what we call forth in other, when we're really in that, I see you and I hear you, all of a sudden it's disarming. And then the level of, even if you don't necessarily agree, what can happen in that space is really remarkable.
Yeah. I agree. There was something that I also read on your website that I wanted to read out. And then there was something that I heard on a podcast I want to follow up with. So it said, HeartRise is designed to guide any age, gender, and culture back to the wisdom of the heart. And just to follow on from that, I listened to a podcast actually on my drive back home earlier with Russell Brand from the UK. He was having a conversation with Radhanath Swami. I hope I got his name right. Radhanath Swami said that true wisdom is the capacity to see all living beings with equal vision.
I love that. And that speaks, it's so beautiful actually, because what that says to me, and through, what I would share around the lens of HeartRise, and back to that piece, what you just shared about all, gender, ages, cultures, I'm going to get all emotional, but it's okay, because that's what we do. And it's okay too, because we can move through it. But, the heart sees so much deeper than the physical eye. It's something that I just shared about recently, and it's the truth. I say that we all know each other by heart, and I stand by that. I believe that, it's back to that, the light in me sees the light in you, or the heart in me, the essence of the spirit in me, however you want to define it. But there is something that connects us. And in that connection lives the wisdom that unites us. So there's that. So the wisdom and the vision are very directly connected. And, it's something that we inherently know and have access to. And with practice, we can really come home to it. But it does take a level of courage to be able to really move through a lot of the sort of residual kind of toxic funk that we've been holding for so long, that keeps us kind of blocked from that access. Because it does take a level of being vulnerable to be in that real wisdom of willingness to see someone for their beingness, to even be in the face of, let's say, a fearful situation, and to really just see their humanity. Someone hurt people, someone who's caused harm, and I've been in situations like that where I've just been able to gaze at someone and just see them, someone who's, perhaps never been seen, and the gift of that, what that awakens in the other, and the wisdom that transcends from that is profound. So
Yeah, and something that you just said then as well about I see you. A lot of people, I think what it can come down to is just being known that somebody sees you and somebody hears you.
Yeah. And there's immense, wisdom in that, because that's the sort of the heart seeing, right? It's sort of a seeing. It's like, I see your beingness over what you've done and the accolades and all the validation and all the stuff that the should show, or that busy nonstop narrative tells us we need to, it's like this constant sort of rat race of getting there. Where are we trying to get? Ultimately, we're just trying to come home, I believe, to who we are. And when we remember that and we're seen, it's like, oh, like what a gift, and there's that and there's profound wisdom available in that, yeah.
I just, everything you just said in that moment, Jessie May, as a society and a structure, we are programmed into some sort of a race, as you mentioned, and that is to be a part of a system and essentially consume and get to the end and look back and, well, what was everything for, And I think that why I'm so grateful for your time and why it's so important, the work that you do, is because it will allow people to just, even if it's for a moment, think about something. And once they've had that thought for that moment, that thought is the seed that will then grow to more thoughts and to more inquisitive questions. And I really think that's so important. And I have faith and know that is the direction for the future as well.
I really believe that. And, this time now, this sort of slowing down and being in this sort of space of COVID, I feel like so much has been coming up for so many. And, that really being confronted with ourselves, like when we're in that frenetic pace of going, doing, having more, this destination addiction, we don't really have to deal with the feels, right? Because it's so easy to check out and to consume more, or to stay kind of preoccupied with all of it. But when we actually are being confronted with the truth of who we are, and or with someone that we really love and we want to work through something, that power of what's available inside and the courage to plug into that and to access that, the liberation and the wisdom that comes through that is profound. Yeah, it makes everything worthwhile.
So there's a couple of things I want to ask before we wrap this up, and you've very gratefully said that you will lead us through a guided short meditation at the end of this. So before we get to that and start with that, actually, one thing I'd really love to know, is there some person, maybe a company or whoever it could be, that really ignites you or gives you passion and energy, that you see are doing some incredible work?
Yeah, I would have to say one of my favorites currently, who's very current, is Esther Perel. I'm a huge fan of her work, and she talks a lot about relational intelligence. She's a therapist, but talk about HeartRise. I just am super moved by her message, her authenticity, her integrity. So that's sort of like a living hero, if you will. And then I've got a lot that aren't necessarily like, Rumi, Maya Angelou. There's a few that are, high up there in the... Yeah, one of my favorite all-time quotes would be the Maya Angelou quote, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with. And if not, I can't hear it enough times, but it's that people will forget what you say and what you do, but they will never forget how you make them feel. And, I believe that so inherently, which is also why, although we haven't had a big kind of choo-choo marketing wagon the whole way along, I know that every heart that I've reached, I say it's heart seeds that I've planted over the journey, because we're on the cusp, as you know, of a pretty big launch in the fall, and there's a lot rolling out and some pretty exciting developments at a time when I believe the world needs more heart than ever. But what I also know is that I haven't been about the marketing and the this, and I believe that connection is our greatest currency. And when you plug in and you take the time, even back to the days when I used to have just a small handful of people at my house for heart circles, like each one of those, if I tell you how many times someone's come back and said that one session was life-changing and impacted me. So, those feels are real and those experiences are real. And when we come home, the more we really experience the truth of who we are, those stay heart printed and imprinted in really meaningful ways. So yeah.
I really love that. I really love that. So, Jessie May, would you like to lead us in a short guided meditation? That would
Sure, I
be
would be
so
honored
fantastic.
to. Yeah, and I will just say too, for anyone tuning in who, if you have another practice, I will say that HeartRise plays well with others, as I love to share, because I do teach this in a lot of different spaces and places. And if you've struggled with meditation, it's guided, so it will support you. And if you already have an active practice, then this will just complement. So I invite you to. We'll just drop in and we'll just do a sample, and I'll take you guys through the 4 steps. So I'll invite you, wherever you are, if it's available, to bring both hands to lay flat over your heart center and to close your eyes. And just allow yourself to drop in here as you anchor in your heart and just breathe. So taking a nice long, deep breath in. And just settling here, feeling held by the earth, connected by our hearts, feeling this powerful life force energy that lives and breathes in you and me as we breathe here. Just inviting that breath and the sound of my voice to guide you as you anchor here, as you tune in, as you connect. And as you breathe here, tuning in and seeing with heart vision your heart's intention. So inviting in, it may be an intention for this chapter right now, this moment, the horizon ahead, something imminent in your life, just seeing whatever arises from within, seeing your heart's intention and breathe into it with heart vision, seeing it, honoring it, just allowing. And as you breathe here with heart focus, feel into that intention. So as if igniting the engine of your being, breathe as you feel. Each breath feeling more, honoring that powerful source inside as you breathe. Feeling into your intention. And as you breathe with heart knowing, building that self-trust, building that connection within, and freeing now as you release, as you open, letting go of any attachment to that intention, as you build that heart knowing, that resilience within. Everything is here for you. Breathe as you free, as you open. As you allow that heart wisdom to flow, just recognizing this natural guiding rhythm inside. This power, this presence, this rhythm that is the beingness, that life force energy that unites us. Breathe as it flows and washes over you, replenishing you. And as you breathe here, as you connect in, as you anchor here in your heart, feeling that powerful presence, knowing that each time you come home here to your heart, you strengthen, you build self-trust, you remember who you are, honoring the gift of showing up for yourself in this way. And trusting you're exactly where you're meant to be. Breathe. And as you bring this heartful presence back into the space with awareness, just breathing back here, feeling held by the ground, softly bringing your focus back here. And you can just gently open your eyes as you feel ready. You can bring a little smile to your face and welcoming you back. Just noticing how you feel now. Yeah, and if there was a word or an energy that you feel, you can share that if you want to, Luke.
Oh, I guess as you said that, warmth. Warmth. Yeah, there was, my mind actually wasn't racing too much, but there was a lot, I guess, that I was feeling. A lot of gratitude. Yeah, a lot of gratitude. So I really want to thank you again so much for your time, Jessie May. I can't advocate enough the work you do. I would love so many people to just look into what you do, take a class, read more about what you do, and maybe if someone's listening that needs to bring this to their work environment, I think that would be great as well.
Thank you so much, Luke, for having me and for the beautiful heart that you shine and all the work that you do in the world. You are such a natural born connector, and it's an honor to share this space with you. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I truly appreciate that. Jessie May, before you leave, can you just tell us where people can find out more information from you?
Absolutely. The best place would be the website, and that's heartrisemovement.com. And there's a lot of connections and resources through there. So you can find the podcast. I have a podcast on there, and a lot of the ways in which you can work with us. Leadership training. We have the next one starting up in June. The course, if someone wants to dive deeper, there's a digital course that you can do at home. So that's all under the method. And as you mentioned, to bring it into your community, we're doing a special offer now for anyone who's in the midst of any kind of challenges vis-a-vis COVID and what's happening right now. We're really making it super accessible and available, and virtually. We're working with teams far and wide. So we're here for you. And at HeartRise Movement on Insta as well. Those are the two, I'd say, main places that we're active.
Fantastic. Jessie May, thank you. I love you. I appreciate your time.
I love you. Thank you so much, sweetheart. Really a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Wow. Jessie May is incredible. I think the work she does is just fantastic. I'm a huge advocate for everything she does. I truly hope that you look into and research more of what she does. And I will be back again soon. Thank you for watching.